Girls and young women who were victimized by Epstein and Maxwell in a escape ring.
I know there are videos and photos. I know that Jeffrey had recording cameras in his house.
Powerful people who caused us harm are being protected and we're being exposed. It is meant to silence us.
To jail, straight to jail. For questioning at least, Erika. Look, I have seen enough, ladies and gentlemen. I've seen enough. Erika Kirk should be dragged into a police precinct for questioning. Like I said, you can show me the person who disagrees with me on that. After I will reveal to you what we can now confirm, you can show me that individual and I will show you a full-blown fraud. That's the only people that would disagree with that assessment. I said to my team this morning that the amount of evidence that is now piling up, I would say against Erika Kirk, is almost akin to an NBC Dateline episode, except it's actually more simplified than that. Like Dateline, that show is way too complicated.
For years, the name Erika Kirk existed in that strange corner of the internet where things are mentioned but never fully explored. It would appear in scattered discussions, buried in comment sections, briefly referenced in forums, and then disappear just as quickly. No headlines, no major coverage, nothing that made people stop and pay attention. Most viewers treated it like background noise, something that sounded serious on the surface, but never quite reached the level of urgency needed to spark real curiosity. And that's exactly why it stayed unnoticed for so long. In a world where attention is everything, being ignored can be more powerful than being exposed. Because when a name floats under the radar long enough, people stop questioning it altogether. But what makes this even more interesting is how quickly that changed. The same name that once meant nothing suddenly started showing up in conversations that were impossible to ignore. And when that shift happened, people didn't just notice, they went back. They started revisiting old mentions, old clips, old connections, trying to understand how something they overlooked for years could suddenly feel so important. And that's where the story really begins. Because what looked irrelevant at first didn't stay that way for long. Everything changed the moment Ellen DeGeneres became part of the conversation again. Before that, discussions around Epstein-related topics often stayed confined to smaller online communities, rarely breaking into mainstream awareness in a serious way. But Ellen wasn't just another celebrity name. She represented a completely different level of visibility and influence. When her name started appearing alongside those discussions, the tone shifted almost instantly. What used to be dismissed as speculation suddenly felt heavier, more real, and harder to ignore. People who had never paid attention before were now asking questions, not because they had all the facts, but because the association itself felt too significant to brush off. And once that door opened, something else happened. Viewers began going back through years of footage, interviews, and public moments, watching them with a completely different perspective. Things that once seemed harmless started feeling layered. Conversations that used to be jokes now carried a different weight. And the deeper people looked, the more they realized this wasn't just about one name being mentioned, it was about how that name connected to a much larger network of relationships. And once that realization set in, there was no going back to seeing things the same way again. As people revisited those past moments, one connection kept coming up again and again: Ellen's interactions with Sean Diddy Combs. At the time, their exchanges felt like typical celebrity banter. Playful interviews, jokes about parties, casual conversations that fit perfectly into the entertainment world. Nothing seemed out of place, but context changes everything. Watching those same clips now, viewers began noticing small details that previously went overlooked. The way certain comments were phrased, the hints about exclusive gatherings, the idea of different types of parties that seemed to exist beyond the public eye. These weren't open events, these were controlled environments, spaces where only a select group of people had access. And that realization sparked a new line of thinking. Because once you accept that these private circles exist, the next question becomes unavoidable. Who else was there? These weren't random social events, they were carefully curated spaces where influence, status, and discretion mattered. And if those environments were as exclusive as they appeared, then every connection within them starts to carry more weight. What once looked like harmless interactions now feels like pieces of a much bigger picture. And that's when people started connecting those dots in ways they hadn't before. With that new perspective, attention shifted back to Erika, but this time, people weren't looking at her as a background figure anymore. They were examining the path she took to reach those high level environments. Her involvement in fashion, media, and networking spaces placed her in rooms that most people never even get close to. At first glance, it looked like ambition, the kind of career progression that comes from determination and opportunity. But when viewed alongside everything else, it began to feel more deliberate. Clips resurfaced showing her speaking about being adaptable, trainable, ready to fit into any situation required of her. At the time, those words sounded like confidence. Now, they're being interpreted differently. Because in spaces where access is tightly controlled, adaptability can mean more than just professionalism, it can mean understanding how to navigate environments that operate under completely different rules. Her connection to influential figures like Diane von Furstenberg only added to that perception. These weren't random opportunities. They were entry points into circles where reputation and discretion mattered just as much as talent. And once people started viewing her journey through that lens, it raised a bigger question. Was this just career growth or something far more calculated? That question became even harder to ignore when attention turned to the Romania project. On the surface, it was presented as humanitarian work helping communities, supporting outreach programs, contributing to something positive. It had all the elements of a story people want to believe. But when individuals began looking deeper, inconsistencies started to appear. Documentation seemed incomplete, timelines didn't fully align, and certain details felt vague where clarity should have existed. What raised even more curiosity was the reported involvement of structured organizations like the United States Marines. For a project described as sending gifts and offering support, that level of backing didn't seem to match the scale of the explanation. And that disconnect is what shifted the narrative. It wasn't about proving anything, it was about understanding why the details didn't fully add up. Because when a story appears straightforward but contains gaps, those gaps naturally draw attention. People began questioning how everything was organized, who was involved behind the scenes, and why certain aspects remained unclear. And once those questions started circulating, the project stopped being viewed as simple charity. It became something people wanted to understand more deeply, especially in the context of everything else being discussed. Then came the moment that pushed the conversation into a completely different space. Reports began circulating that Erika's name had been mentioned in connection to proceedings related to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, it's important to note that a mention alone doesn't confirm involvement or wrongdoing, but perception doesn't always wait for confirmation. The impact comes from the shift in context. What was once considered speculation suddenly felt closer to something official, something that carried more weight simply because of where it appeared. And that was enough to change how people reacted. Instead of dismissing discussions, they started analyzing timelines, revisiting past appearances, and connecting details that previously seemed unrelated. The conversation moved from curiosity to scrutiny, because when a name enters a legal setting even loosely, it signals that there may be more beneath the surface. And that possibility alone is enough to drive attention. From that point forward, every detail connected to Erika began receiving a level of focus it never had before. And the more people looked, the more they felt like they were uncovering pieces of a story that hadn't fully been explained yet. At the same time, this attention was building. Another development added a new layer to the story. Ellen DeGeneres made the decision to step away and relocate to England. Publicly, the reasoning appeared straightforward: personal choices, lifestyle changes, a desire for something different. But timing plays a powerful role in how events are perceived. This move happened during a period when discussions around Epstein-related information were beginning to gain traction again, when conversations about potential new names and resurfaced details were becoming more frequent. And that overlap is what caught people's attention, because when two significant developments happen at the same time, it naturally leads to speculation about whether they're connected. Some viewed it as coincidence, others saw it as strategic distance. The contrast made the situation even more noticeable. While one figure appeared to step back, another was being pulled deeper into the spotlight. And that difference in movement only intensified the curiosity surrounding both narratives. Because in situations like this, timing doesn't just add context, it shapes perception. As the conversation continued to evolve, one of the most unexpected elements began to resurface repeatedly: the use of the word pizza in various contexts. Initially, it seemed harmless, even humorous. References appeared in interviews, casual moments, and public events without raising any concern. But when people began comparing those instances to previously released Epstein-related materials, they noticed something unusual. The same word appeared multiple times in communications that were heavily redacted and lacked clear explanation. On its own, that might not mean anything. But patterns have a way of drawing attention, especially when they appear across unrelated sources. This led to a wave of online theories, with individuals attempting to interpret what those repeated references could mean. At the same time, discussions expanded to include other figures connected to Ellen, such as Stephen Twitch Boss. His passing was officially ruled as self-inflicted, but that didn't stop speculation from spreading, as it often does in situations where public figures are involved. It's important to separate confirmed information from assumptions, yet the overlap of names, events, and recurring details continues to fuel curiosity. Because when multiple elements start aligning in unexpected ways, people naturally begin searching for meaning even when clear answers remain out of reach. And that ongoing search is exactly what keeps this entire conversation alive.